Hello, how the tech are you? This is our weekly tech show on Echoplex Media. We talk about tech news, science news, any tech and science type topics we feel like talking about. I'm historian Matt. I like to talk about different things, a lot of Earth type stuff is going to be today, and a little bit about security. But today, my two topics are, my first one is your chocolate is killing the Earth. And I'll get into what's going on with that. And the second one is 48 states are destroying robocallers. And I may be playing around with clickbaity titles. So how about the guy in the pink hat? Okay.
Thank you. I am HK Perrin, and you can I cover mostly software engineering topics as a software engineer myself, and I've got two really cool ones today. They're both pretty short. The first one is that EPUB 3.3 was released as a W3C recommendation, and I'll tell you why that matters and why it's really cool. And my second one is the latest Deno release supports compiling NPM packages, and I'll tell you why that's really cool too.
And I'm Producer Dave. I am the producer of this and all the other shows here on Echoplex Media. I have two stories as well. One is Elon's companies are pissing off the neighbors in Texas, and the other one is the HP's most popular printer is a big old jerk. So take it away, Matt.
Okay, so quickly, your chocolate is killing the Earth, which you probably are not terribly surprised about, but this is specifically, we've got some science on it. Basically, a team of European researchers collated a map of cocoa farms in Ghana and the Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast has a French name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but I'm just going with our Ivory Coast for now. Anyways, they used some satellite images, and because this is a tech show, of course they used the neural network to generate the maps. But just to verify the results, because we're not going to be reliant on just satellite images and AI, they actually sent researchers into the field to verify that the fields that they thought were cocoa fields were actually cocoa fields. And they found that about 5% of protected areas in Ghana and about 15% in the Ivory Coast have been converted to cocoa farms. So I assume that what they mean by protected areas, that would be like, parks or, other reserves and stuff where people are not really supposed to be doing any farming, and the land is just supposed to be left for nature so people can enjoy the nature there. But other than protected areas, in non-protected areas, where cocoa farming was the most dense, about 40% of the area was actually used for cocoa farms itself. But what is important is in those areas, there was almost no native forest left. So the forests have been completely taken over by cocoa farms, which is not terribly surprising, except that if they're now going into protected areas where they're trying to protect the forest, that's not a good thing. But overall, the cocoa farms and planting is causing about 40% of the deforestation in protected areas in those two countries, which is not good. And that's all a bunch of downers. So decided to have a little bit about how you can help. And there's not a whole lot you can do because you can't trace where all your chocolate is coming from. But if you buy your chocolate from smaller beans to bar chocolate makers, basically small chocolate makers, many of them, you can look it up from them directly, but many of them buy directly from cocoa farmers at a fair price, which means the cocoa farmers themselves are getting like a decent wage. Currently, I think the average wage for a cocoa farmer is like $1 a day. It's really, really low. It's really bad. But, people actually making craft chocolate, they're going to want a single source and are willing to pay for it, and they can pay quite a bit more for it to get the specific flavor that they want. And I'm telling all this because I too make craft chocolate. That was my COVID hobby that I developed. And I really like it, but you can't buy it anywhere. I just make it for myself. Too bad. What do you guys think?
I had some of your chocolate. It was delicious.
Good.
Yes, your chocolate is very wonderful. I actually have a little bit left in my fridge. I think that is very sad that that much forest has been destroyed for chocolate. It is better than forest being destroyed for tobacco, but not by much.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised because I don't know if you've seen these quote fields for cocoa plantations, but cocoa comes from trees, so it's kind of like they're forests in and of themselves. But it's basically they're replacing a diverse forest with a single plant in a different kind of forest. It's actually cacao tree, I guess you could say. So there's some point where cacao turns into cocoa, but I'm just calling everything cocoa for now, for simplicity.
Monocultures never go wrong, right?
Yeah, it's never ever a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, all it's going to take is like one disease to wipe out all of those trees. Just like what happened to the Gros Michel bananas.
Yeah.
There was a disease called Panama disease that wiped out basically almost 100% of Gros Michel bananas, which is why the bananas we eat today are Cavendish bananas.
Yep. And those are I think there's a disease trying to take those out now, which has so far been controlled, but that may change. Hopefully not. Anyways, I don't eat many bananas, but I eat a lot of chocolate and cocoa. So
deforestation is always bad, and like it's almost always like for some other kind of agriculture, and it's I don't know what the answer is. I mean maybe we just have to learn to live with less cocoa.
Yeah, there's another way of dealing with it that I read about. I think it was in this article or one link to it or something, where people were experimenting with basically planting the cocoa trees in forests that already exist. So you have a mix of plants, and the cocoa trees themselves, like they don't need direct sun. In fact, they need a little bit of shade. So you can have big shade trees over top of them, and that actually helps with production. So there is some you can do that way, but still that reduces the diversity to some respect. But yeah,
we could also grow them on the moon.
Yeah.
We just need to figure out the whole, growing plants on the moon thing first.
Right.
But then we'd have a monoculture on the moon, and a disease would just take out all the plants on the moon.
That is true.
That's called a monoculture.
That's a monoculture. Boo. All right, what you got next, Matt?
All right, for my next one, and this is a big deal. The 48 states try to destroy robocallers. Basically, what's happening is 48 U.S. states accuse Avid Telecom of routing billions of illegal robocalls to U.S. residents on the Do Not Call registry. And basically, robocalls are those automated phone calls everybody gets, usually selling warranties or something like that. Many of those calls are, in fact, just out and out scams, including the warranty ones. So basically, many of the robocalls by this Avid Telecom, that apparently I think is out of Arizona, use spoof numbers to make it difficult for customers to detect that the calls were robocalls before answering. And of course, that damages the reputations of any companies whose numbers were spoofed. This is also completely illegal to spoof numbers, and there are supposed to be protections against that. But many of the scams that went through this particular telecom included a bunch of common ones. I have a whole list here. I don't think I'm going to go through them all, but really bad ones like Social Security Administration scams are pretty bad, and Medicare scams are pretty bad. But there's just a whole list, including the auto warranty ones and all that stuff. And basically, states are a bunch of states, and particularly states' attorney generals are after it. Attorneys general is the plural. Sorry, are going after them and taking down the telecom itself instead of actually going against the specific scammers. Now, there is a separate lawsuit against at least one of the scammers that used Avid Telecom, but this particular case is interesting because they're going after the telecom itself. So while we're talking about it and the security, I think I've brought this up somewhere before. I don't know if I've talked about it specifically on the show or after the show, but how did Avid Telecom get around security intended to prevent spoof calls? Like, the phone network is a private network, or it's, run by a number of private entities. It is not a public network, so why is it even possible to spoof calls? Well, apparently IP phone networks, which Avid Telecom actually uses, are required to use the stir/shaken authentication technology to avoid spoof calls. Now, I didn't get a lot of information on what this technology it is, so I can't go into a lot of details, but basically it's public key encryption that is used to basically make a signature to verify that the caller ID is who they say it is, and the person calling with the particular caller ID is actually owns that ID, or basically owns that phone number. And in this case, Avid Telecom was they basically provided customers with direct inward dialing. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but apparently it's a different method of doing the phone numbers. I think it's an older protocol, and it basically allowed them to spoof the numbers without using the stir/shaken technology. What do you guys think? Big deal. Hopefully some less robocalls.
Yep. Bad company.
So there was a program you could use for a while called FireRTC. It was a web-based program. You could just spoof a phone number on it. Spoofing a phone number is trivial. You used to even be able to do it with Google Voice, if I'm not mistaken, but Google took that feature out. Or maybe they were unaware that the feature was there and people were using Google Voice, in a way that it wasn't designed to be used, like kind of in the early days of Google Voice. There were also plugins that, for old versions of Skype that you would let you do that. Mind you, Skype didn't authorize the plugins or whatever, that you were just able to do it. Like basically any phone-based or any web-based phone system, unless they disallow it, it's pretty trivial for somebody to spoof a phone number on it.
Right, but I think that's why they're pushing for this authentication technology to be used, so it could not be spoofed in the future. But apparently not everybody is supporting it, and they currently have to support older standards from what I can tell. I'm not positive on that, but I would not be surprised in the future if a lot of big telecoms just start dropping calls that don't use this authentication method, which should stop spoof numbers completely.
I wonder if you could support like half of this authentication method, shaken, not stir.
I'm pretty sure that's where the name comes from, but I didn't actually look up the acronym or any details.
Yeah, I would assume that's where it's from. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, I've used my entire pun allotment for the
for the entire for the entire journey that this show has been and will be.
All right, fair enough.
Anyway, I think it's your turn now, HK.
All right, so my first story is about a standard called EPUB. You might have heard of EPUB if you have an ebook reader. EPUB is an electronic publishing standard, and version 3.3 of that standard just came out, and it is now a W3C recommendation. So what that means is W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, governs this standard now, and it is officially a web standard, which makes sense because it's based on web technologies. Basically, it is an EPUB file is just a zip file of a bunch of HTML and XML and CSS and image files that come together to make a book. It's used on a number of devices, like the Barnes & Noble Nook, the Kobo reader, Sony's e-readers, which they don't make anymore, but the old ones support EPUB. But notably, there's one e-reader that does not support EPUB, and it's the most popular one, the Kindle. So now that EPUB is an official web standard, it's going to be hard for Amazon to justify not supporting it in their e-readers. I know their e-readers are pretty bare bones. I don't even think they have a browser. But still, now it's a web standard. They should support it. What do you guys think?
They should have supported it before. I think it's probably trivial to support this standard.
It's not exactly trivial because it basically takes most of a web browser. Like you have to implement pretty much all of what a web browser implements to implement this standard. But I'm sure they already have that. And if they don't, there's open source technologies that they could use to have that. You know, Amazon's not, their engineers aren't stupid. They could for sure implement this.
So my guess is Amazon is using the DRM excuse or something like that. Like if they use a standard, people are just going to steal all their books or something.
But that's the thing. EPUB supports DRM. Yeah. You know, even if you want to lock those books down and make them only readable by a user logged into their Amazon account, Amazon could do that. There's no reason for them to not include EPUB, except that EPUB is what everyone distributes books as. So, you know, Amazon having almost a monopoly on e-readers just doesn't support the thing that everyone uses.
Right, and it's not to say that if they supported EPUB that they couldn't continue to use whatever file type they're using for their own books. They would just be adding support for EPUB so that you could pull your books from somewhere else, like a free book you got somewhere. You could just put it on your Kindle. They should certainly do that. I think they're it's lock in. They're trying to lock you in, and it's a dumb thing to lock someone into. Like it's like the most petty of the lock-ins I think that I've ever heard of, to be perfectly honest.
Yep.
Imagine you have a book. Oh, it would be nice if you could read that book on your Kindle, wouldn't it? It'd be a shame if you couldn't read that book on your Kindle because you bought it somewhere else, book guy. Like, come on.
Yeah.
What like that's just it's the pettiest lock-in. I don't care that much, but it's just extra petty, just super extra petty.
Yeah, and especially because they do support formats that you can put, like they support PDF. So you could just convert an EPUB to a PDF and put it on your Kindle. There's no reason for them to not support EPUB other than like just making it a little bit harder to work with everyone else. Kind of like Tesla with their chargers, you know?
Kind of.
Well, technically, Tesla has added adapters for their chargers now. So a lot of them, not all of them, can be used for any car.
Yeah. Exactly what I said, though. Just making it a little bit harder to work with everyone else.
Yep.
Well, I mean, Amazon doesn't even have the adapter, right?
Yeah.
Right. You have to get that. You have to get that yourself.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's just dumb. But yeah. I'm glad this is a web standard now. That's pretty cool. I mean, I'm sure that before that it was declared, it was all but declared a web standard anyway, because like before this, a browser could open an EPUB book, right?
Some browsers can. I know there's an extension for Firefox that lets you open EPUB books. I think does Opera have it built in? I don't know. Some browsers might have it built in, but there's certainly extensions that you can have to open them.
Well, very cool. What do you got next?
All right. So my next one is the latest Deno release supports compiling NPM packages. Deno is a competitor to Node.js. If you've heard of Node.js, basically it runs JavaScript on the server side. And Deno is a competitor to that. Deno runs JavaScript on the server side. Deno, also like Node.js, uses the V8 JavaScript engine, which is the JavaScript engine that Chrome uses. So if you're using Google Chrome, you already use this same JavaScript engine. But Deno has a lot of other nice features, and one of them is the Deno compile command, which converts your Deno application to one single binary. And up until this release, Deno compile didn't support NPM packages. So these are packages that are written for Node. NPM stands for Node Package Manager. They're packages that are written with the intention to run on Node.js. And Deno has supported them since 1.28, Deno 1.28. But now with Deno 1.34, you can compile NPM packages as well, including you can just compile an NPM package. It doesn't even have to be a Deno package. I tried it with my own package called Nephili Serve, and it almost worked. The only reason it didn't work is because I was using a Node, something that is built on top of Node that's written in C that doesn't work in Deno. But it's very cool that, as long as you're just using Node's available functionality without adding things on top of it, Deno should be able to compile your NPM package. And what this means is that you can distribute one single binary with all of your dependencies. So kind of like how AppImage works for Linux software. You have one package, one binary that has all of your dependencies. That includes Deno itself. So it would have Deno itself, it would have your code, and it would have all the NPM packages that your code relies on, which is very cool. Any questions about that?
So it's the idea is so that it's like cross-platform, like with the what was that, the NPM package?
Mm-hmm. So you could compile your NPM package to run as a standalone binary on Windows, on Linux, and on Mac, and just distribute those binaries to your users.
Very cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I got a lot of experience on the server side, but not with any like JavaScript or any of those the things that allow you to run server side JavaScript. So interesting. I knew about half those words. Good.
I'm a Node.js developer. It's what I develop it's what I'm building my email system in. It's what I build basically all my software in. And I also write Electron software, which is basically a Chromium window that interacts with a Node.js application. So I'm intimately familiar with Node.js, and I was checking this out today, and it really impressed me. So as a Node.js developer, I am quite impressed at what Deno has done here.
Very nice. And just kind of maybe tangentially, the only thing I don't like about these like universal packages is there just ends up being like bloat everywhere. But I don't think this is going to be the case because these are going to be much smaller than like, where if you're running everything as a snap or an app image and it's got all the dependencies in it, now you have, every dependency that you need is now packaged with the app. And so now instead of just having it once, you've got it 50 times. And it fills up a lot of space. But I think what we're talking about here, I think, if I'm not mistaken, though, the files and stuff are going to be a lot smaller. And when I compiled my server binary, it compiled down to like 95 megabytes. So it's pretty small binaries that it outputs. Yeah. Well, that's good. Great. I don't know anything about that, but it sounds like it's going to work for a lot of people, and developers are going to like it. So I guess unfortunately now it's my turn because I bring the bad news. Well, we have Elon's Boring Company and SpaceX are applying for permission to dump treated wastewater into the Colorado River at their location in Bastrop County, Texas. Sounds great, right? Who wouldn't want that? So they've already had some problems with regulators regarding runoff, and the neighbors are happy for the jobs, but they don't really trust Elon's company to clean up after themselves for, whatever reason. The article that I've linked here focuses on one guy. He's a software engineer actually up there who seems like a bit of an Elon stan, but didn't seem too pleased about the developments up there. So I don't know. Are either you surprised that the people in the neighborhood where Elon put some factories and stuff are starting to get annoyed with him?
Not at all surprised.
Yep, I'm not at all surprised. And my guess is that Texas will allow them to dump their waste into the river. It's Texas.
And I mean, this isn't just some random river. This is the Colorado River. This is like one of those like American, like iconic bits of geography, you should
It
not
also provides water for like much of the Southwest. Like many of the people living there in the Southwest take their water, use their water from the Colorado River. And it's good like that he's returning water back to the Colorado River instead of letting it evaporate off. And it's good that he at least claims that it's treated. But yeah, like, do you trust Elon Musk to properly treat it? Are they doing like follow-on testing to make sure that the water is properly treated and, back to basically just water being put back in? Are they doing enough testing? Like, who knows what chemicals they're using? If they test for just the ones that they're treating for, then yeah, it's going to look great. But what if there's some other chemicals that are getting through they're not testing for?
One of the funniest quotes in there is like, some other person that they talked to said, "I like Elon Musk, but I don't really want his poop in the river."
I mean, that's the least of the problems,
Right.
If it was actually like waste, human waste, like there's ways of dealing with that. You can let nature take care of that for the most part after some basic treatment. But it's really what chemicals are they using in factories that are harmful to human health and wildlife health in general that we don't even know about.
Yeah, it's all bad. The other thing that the people were saying was that the facility is just kind of an eyesore, that it was in like a beautiful place, and that they did not expect the facility to just be ugly. But
that's not surprising.
But this shouldn't surprise anybody. But like it just if you're gonna put up like just the pictures they were showing of the area in the article, people should check out the article. The pictures, the area was beautiful, and then they like had a picture where they like backed out and you saw the factory and you're like, what is that doing there? Looked like it didn't belong there. There were other problems with like the roads, like going up to the factory, how these in sort of typical Elon Musk fashion, didn't really do everything they needed to do before they put the roads in, and just a lot of little stuff that kind of piles up and kind of annoys the people who live there. So that's that one. And my next one is, I've never really been a fan of HP for their consumer products, because they're always doing dumb stuff. For a long time, they just made really bad laptops and desktop computers that just didn't work and like wouldn't even last as long as their warranty. But now their new printer is a big jerk. It's not the new printer. It's their most popular printer on Amazon. You get 6 months of free ink, but it comes with some really nasty DRM. It's an $85 wireless printer and scanner. Seems like a great deal. You have 7 days from the time you plug it in and connect it to your internet to decide whether or not you're going to join HP Plus. HP Plus gives you 6 months of free ink and extends the warranty. And I'm not kidding, also plants a tree. And but then it makes it so you can just never use third-party ink ever. I'm sure there'll be people that'll find a way to kind of crack this. But the problem with this isn't so much that you have to buy their ink now. The problem is when they discontinue this printer, if you like really like this printer and they're not making ink for it anymore, the price of the ink skyrockets on the aftermarket. And so now you can't use a third-party ink. And so you are stuck either overpaying for the ink because you like the printer, which I'm not sure who's going to like this $85 printer that much. Or guess what, guys? You go buy another printer.
Yep.
Yeah, I would highly recommend everyone skip HP altogether. None of their printers are good. And buy a printer that takes bottles of ink. The one that I have right over here is called an Epson Eco Tank printer, and they're very expensive. Like you look at that printer, my printer here probably has like about the same features. It's a little bigger, so maybe it holds more pages, or it's got a document feeder, not just a flatbed. So it's got some more features, but it's not a whole lot more. So you'd think maybe that printer would cost like $150 if it were an HP printer. which is probably true, but then you'd be stuck buying their grossly expensive ink. This printer here is $360. And there's a reason that it's $360, because that's the fucking price of the printer. If you don't subsidize it with extremely expensive ink, you end up just buying the price of the hardware, which is what I want to do. When I buy a printer, I don't want to like buy the printer super cheap. It would be like buying a car where like your car takes a special kind of gas that costs like $15 a gallon. Like, that would be ridiculous. Why would you do that? But the car itself is only $5,000. So, if you're going to buy a printer, you might as well just pay the cost of the printer and get something that can take just a bottle of ink. And the bottles of ink for this thing, I've had this printer for like 2 years now, or almost 2 years. I'm still on the first bottle of ink, and I've printed out like several binders full of like documentation for protocols with this thing. So I've probably printed about 3,000 pages on it, and it's still got half the black ink left from the first bottle.
Yeah, and and for most people, like the other thing I'm going to say is just buy a laser printer. Like, if you don't need color, just buy a laser printer. And like HK was saying, buy one where you're paying a couple $100, $300, $250 for the printer, so that you're not buying into somebody's toner cartridge program.
Yep.
Just find one that the toner cartridge doesn't have a chip on it. That's all that's if the toner cartridge doesn't have a chip on it, there's no DRM. So that's like fairly simple. I have a laser printer. I think I paid $140 for it like 5 years ago. It's fantastic. It's discontinued, but Linux people love it because you just plug it into your network via the Ethernet cable, and it doesn't matter what kind of Linux you have, it just sees the printer and prints on it. And so people like the Linux community and like people just love it. You can still get them used for like $100, even though like they were 180 or 200 or something. And you can get not ink, but toner for it all day long. And the toner cartridges from like third parties are anywhere between $20 and $40. And it's just because I bought the printer itself when I bought the printer. I didn't buy into somebody's ink scam or into somebody's toner scam.
And that's another thing, is you want something where there are third party manufacturers for it. Like with HP, I think they have patents on certain of their designs that they like very strictly control who can make their ink cartridges. So you'll see this little plastic cartridge of ink that costs like $80. And the bottle of ink for this guy that lasts, on the ink bottle, it says it lasts 6,000 pages, which I think is true based on my experience. That bottle of ink from Epson costs $15.
Right.
And then you could get like third-party bottles of ink for like $10. I've seen them go down as low as like $8, but I probably wouldn't buy an $8 bottle of ink. I mean, I'm just going to buy the Epson ink. Like,
right. Let them
great.
Let them make a reasonable profit on selling you the ink afterward. Right. They'll make a few bucks on it, and that's fine. Right. It's like, how much do you think HP is making on that $80 cyan ink cartridge that you? Oh, and you know what? The other thing these printers do. My parents had one that did this, where if the blue went out, you just can't print. It doesn't matter that you're just trying to print a black piece of like they all have to. It will just tell you you're out of ink, even if you're just out of one of them and you're just trying to print a black and white document. 100% guaranteed this HP printer does that.
Yep. No cyan.
So
that's okay. I'm just trying to print this black and white. No cyan.
No cyan.
I wonder if it disables the scanner too if you're out of ink.
Oh, I'm pretty sure the HP ones do, yeah. Or if you're not subscribed to the like HP Plus thing, I remember them. I could be misremembering, but I think I remember like a couple years ago, they made the scanner part not work if you weren't subscribed, and people got really pissed about it, and they backtracked it. But my guess is they've re-implemented it.
So
in another like 6 years, when I go through the 2 bottles of ink that this thing came with, I'm just going to buy another $15 bottle of Epson ink, and I'll have ink for basically my life if I spend like, a couple $100 to buy like a big box full of ink.
The other thing HP does that and I don't think they realize it, is by making really crappy consumer products, they're shooting themselves in the foot on the enterprise, because people don't really differentiate between HPE and HP. And so if you're going to go buy printers for your business and you just read this story, you're like, hey, you've heard about that company Brother? We should buy printers from Brother or Epson or even Dell or Samsung, just anyone else, because you didn't just read this story about this jerk of a printer that HP put out.
Yep. Yeah, and if HP is willing to screw over their consumers, of course they're willing to screw over their enterprise customers.
Yeah, and even though their enterprise stuff is generally pretty good, and you're not going to run into this problem, you will be able to buy third-party ink for like one of those big HP printers, floor standing ones. You will be able to buy third-party ink. It's just that they're never going to tell you that. And you just have this nasty taste in your mouth from the HP printer that you bought at home. And like I said, the worst part of this is actually when HP discontinues this ink, now people like me would just be like, well, you're an idiot and you bought this printer. I found a giant box of this ink and I'm going to charge top dollar for it. Fuck you, dumbass. I'm going to sell it on eBay for as much as I could possibly get, because I'm still rocking the same laser printer I've had for 5 years. And you should
That's
too.
capitalism, baby.
So, yeah, I was more mad about the second story, even though the first story I had was like more important and impacts more people's lives in a more direct way. Although, where do all those little tiny ink cartridges end up? They end up in the landfill.
They grow into a tree, right?
Oh, they grow into a tree.
That's how they plant a tree, right?
Wait, all these little,
there's just like 2 seeds inside the ink cartridge.
you grow a cyan tree, like a GMO cyan tree that scares that living crap out of like some conspiracy theorist somewhere. But yeah,
it bears fruit, except instead of oranges, they're cyans.
This ink cartridge with like the residue of the ink that it's using ends up in the landfill, and that's just not good for the planet. So yeah, the big tank ones are good, and I think the laser printer ones, there's probably some pretty nasty stuff in the toner cartridges for those. But if you like you were saying, 6,000 pages is the last toner cartridge I bought, and it's been in there. I print more than most people because if people notice, like during the shows, if you kind of see, I have I print out dockets for this show, for the Down Ballot local news show, and then for the Sunday show, the rapid fire news panic attack we do here. And so I do print more than other people. Plus I have to print stuff, this and that, for what's left of my day job. Or if I just want notes in front of me, if I'm interviewing somebody, I always print it out. But yeah, I mean, I've had this cartridge since I think I might have bought it like at the beginning of the pandemic. And I print more than most people. So yeah, just keep in mind that like when you're buying, especially like something like a printer, first of all, most people don't even need a printer. But so the other thing that happens is really messed up with these too, is these little tiny ink cartridges, they dry out.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you'd be lucky to get like 250 pages out of one of them before they dry out.
Right. Even if they wouldn't have been emptied by you, people buy these cheap printers because they're like, oh, I never really print anything. But then when they go to print something, their cartridges are all dried out, and then they end up going to like the FedEx office or Kinko's or whatever anyway, because their printer doesn't work. And then because they've looked online, like, I need 3 of these things. Wait a minute. These cartridges are almost as much as the printer. 6 months free ink is nothing for most people. Most people don't use their printer.
Yeah, I was going to say I can't remember the last time I printed something, but I actually do. And the last time I printed something was for some legal documents that I needed to print out and sign or something like that. I don't remember the exact details, but and then most signature stuff is now done online anyways. So that was just kind of a unique thing. I think it was actually something I had to go to the US government, and they're a little bit behind, but I hardly ever print stuff out. So
Yeah, how many sheets do you think 6 months of free ink is for the average consumer? 10?
Probably 6.
For me, it'd be like 2.
Even for me, it would be like maybe 150. Well, 6 months. Let's see.
You print
No,
out a
6 months-
docket every day.
That would be 180 if I did a single sheet. But
Yeah.
let's say 3 dockets a week, 24 weeks in 6 months. So that's 75, and then multiply that by like 3 or 4. Yeah, it's less than 500. Like way less than. And I print like a lot. Like most people, I'm telling you, most people, the first 6, they buy the printer, they hook it up, they print the test sheet, and then they don't use the printer for 6 months.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, check this out. We've never had a wireless printer before, because their old printer, they didn't even think to replace for the last 4 years because they've used it 3 times in the last 4 years.
And another thing people don't realize is if you don't print for a while, your printer is going to flush, it's going to clean its print heads by flushing ink.
Right.
And that is just going to waste a lot of your ink. So even if you don't print once in a while, these printers are still terrible deals because you're just going to be wasting a bunch of ink every time you do print.
That's why for most people don't need color printing, and it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because if you remember, like when we were young, laser printers were nobody had them, right? Because they were kind of expensive. But now, for most people, if you don't need color, like a laser printer is the way to go because it doesn't flush anything. You're gonna get the sheets out of it. It's just gonna be more expensive. And you could get a laser printer for $120. But just don't buy the HP one. Buy the Samsung one that's 160 because then you'll be able to use third-party ink cart or third-party toner on it. But yeah, this 6 months of free ink, people are like, "Oh, that's great." It's like, no, Susan, you're going to print out 4 documents.
Yep. And then you're going to have to buy $60 ink cartridges.
4 of them.
Yeah.
The price of a real printer. And now you're still stuck with this printer, but at least you got to print those 4 documents for free.
Yeah, and if you go to FedEx Kinko's, or I think it's just called FedEx Office now, you can print out 4 documents for like 40 cents. So if you really don't print that often,
if
just go to an office store.
If they're color, it might cost you $2.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, this is all bad. For most people, don't buy a printer. Honestly, most people just don't even buy the thing. Like, I don't care.
And definitely not this one.
Yeah, but for most people, I mean, if you live in like a city or a suburb and you have a thumb drive, you don't need a printer.
Yep.
Yeah.
You could even do the full service thing where you go, hey, there's 3 files on here. Can I get 4 copies of each one? Go get yourself a mocha and come back and they overcharge you for that. Oh no, you're out $8.
Yeah.
But HP didn't screw you over at any point during this process.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe even tip, be like, here's 10, keep the change. I'm just glad I didn't have to buy a printer. And not for nothing, if it took most people, they'll buy a printer and not only do they not use it, but then when they go to use it, they can't get it to work because they're the crappiest piece of technology you're ever going to buy because of all the moving parts in it. They're going to be the first thing to break. So just go to the FedEx office.
Yeah, these cheap printers, they are made cheap. I know they're subsidized, the ink does subsidize them, but they're still made to be ridiculously cheap so that if you never end up actually buying ink, the company doesn't lose much money. They might lose a little, or it might be sold at cost, but they're you can't build a good printer for $85, just period. You cannot do that. So this one here that's $360, it probably cost them close to $200 to make.
Right. And I'd say if you print stuff less than once a month, just don't buy a printer. Let someone else, they have a whole place full of printers where I don't know how, but they all work. And if they don't work, somebody will help you.
Yep.
A printer, basically, if you don't have someone to help you with your printer, don't buy the printer. Even if it's just emotional support from your life partner or whatever. You're just crying now because your printer doesn't work. You're like, we could have gone out to a nice dinner for $85, but instead we have this crappy printer. Anyway, we could do it. We could keep going on this, but that's the end of my stories. Don't buy this $85 printer. Like HK was saying, if you do buy an inkjet printer, buy one of the ones with the big tanks. I've heard good things about the ones you have, and I think there's another company that does it.
Yeah, I think Brother does it as well. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Brother has a ink tank printer.
And if you buy a laser printer, just go out and punch the name of the laser printer into like eBay and make sure there are third parties making ink for it. Not necessarily. It might be better to buy the genuine toner. It might be, it might be better than the third party toner. But then, if the company that makes your printer stops making the toner and your printer works just fine, which is a miracle for most people, then you can just put other toner in it, and it still works fine. So that's also just for the longevity of the product, because you don't want to end up having to throw it away or recycle it or whatever just because you can't get toner, because that's wasteful. And then if you actually spent good money on the printer, then I don't know, the whole thing's messed up. For most of you, just go to FedEx.
Yeah.
Whose turn is it to read the show out?
I think it's yours.
Oh, I'm good at this.
And then mine's next week. So
I'm good at this. I read all of my shows out. Most of my shows I read out like, all right, I'm really tired and I've had 4 cocktails. Who are we rating? But I guess we don't do that here. Thanks everybody for checking out How the Tech Are You. This is our weekly tech show. Usually comes out on Wednesdays, although lately I haven't been able to get it out till Thursday. But whatever. Thanks for downloading it. Make sure you're subscribed on your podcatcher of choice. And if you want to support this project, eplex.store has a membership that is very much like Patreon, except you get a discount on any of our swag in the swag shop, such as this tinfoil hat that I'm currently wearing. And if you're on Patreon and don't want to sign up for another service, I totally understand it. Patreon.com/Echoplex. Everything else, just find at echoplexmedia.com. Have a great tech week, everybody.